Really? You gonna stare at me the whole time?
This is a live studio audience.
Really? Hey guys, it's Tanya, and I am talking all things adoption. This month, November, is Adoption Awareness Month. So I'm just covering a few topics, talking about my experience with adoption and all of that fun stuff. So grab your cup of coffee, hit the subscribe button if you haven't already, and if you have, thank you so much. And let's start talking about transitioning. So I shared previously the process with adopting our first child and how that all looked. And so today I am going to talk about the transition. And so basically transitioning with him coming home, coming into our family, and how all of that looked and what that kind of process was like. So as I talked about before, we had a 6-month waiting period where he was with us for 6 months before we could officially adopt him. And during that 6 months, it was a very hard transition. So hard from the standpoint that my oldest daughter at the time, she really struggled. Our adopted son, he cried a lot. He was terrified of so many things. So we would go to the pool or we went on vacation and would go swimming. He was terrified. So he would scream the entire time. And a lot of times we would end up leaving, or it just wouldn't be that great of a time, which frustrated my oldest daughter, who was at the time, I think she may have been 5, maybe not even that old. She may have been like 4, somewhere around there. So yeah, she was like 4. So it would irritate her. I mean, as a 4-year-old, you don't understand that, okay, this baby is crying or this child is scared, so we have to leave. You know, as a 4-year-old, you're just leaving something that you love, and so you're frustrated. So a lot of times she would say things like, can we take him back from where we bought him from? Which, of course, you know, trying to make her understand that that's not nice. We don't say that, and we didn't buy him from somewhere. So she struggled a lot with that. Our daughter, who was 18 months, now had to share the spotlight with another 18-month-old. So it was 2, essentially we call them our unofficial twins, because they are 3 days apart. So she now was sharing a birthday, the spotlight, with him, which was difficult for her. And of course, she's 18 months. She couldn't express it, but she acted out a lot. So we had those things going on with our kids. And then for us, it was the fact that he did cry a lot, and we didn't understand. We didn't know why he was terrified. We didn't know why he was crying. You know, we were in it. In hindsight, we now understand that he wasn't exposed to a lot of things. You know, when he was in foster care, his foster parents were wonderful, wonderful people, but they were older, so he didn't get exposed to a lot of things. So these things were new for him. Also processing. And then when we would take vacations and we would put him in his car seat to go on vacation, or when we would take him out of his car seat, anything dealing with his car seat was like traumatizing. I mean, he would scream bloody murder. And so at the time we were stressed and didn't understand why. And then in hindsight, we realized that, okay, the last time that he was put into his car seat, you know, he was put into our car in his car seat, and we drove off, and he never saw his family, you know, what was his family again. And so that was his memory and his trauma. So a car seat was essentially traumatizing for him. So we were transitioning with that. And then he also was an early riser. Again, his foster parents were older, so they were up early, which made him an early riser. And so he would wake up at 5:30 in the morning, or 6 o'clock in the morning, and he would sit in his bed and just yell to the top of his lungs. Not necessarily crying, but like yelling for somebody to come get him out of his bed. He wasn't in a crib, he was in a regular bed, but I think just the idea of getting out of his bed, so he wouldn't get out of his bed. And that was hard because everybody in my family, with the exception of my husband, were late sleepers. So my girls were like, hated it because it would wake them up. I am not a morning person. If you saw my video of me trying to wake up in the morning, you know that I'm not a morning person. So that stressed me out. And so during that time period, there was a lot of like second guessing. I'm just gonna be 100% honest with you guys. My thought and my goal with this series is to be as transparent and as honest as possible, because if you're considering adoption, or if you have adopted and you're in the thick of it, my hope is that with considering, you'll know, like, okay, the good, the bad, the ugly, the wonderful, or all of that. And then if you're in it already, that you're not alone, that other adoptive families have went through it or going through it or whatever. So I would say that first year, there was a lot of like, oh my God, did we make the right decision? Maybe we should have stuck with our thought process of an older child. This is like having a brand new baby that we hadn't mentally prepared ourselves for, because we had a 1-year-old, and we knew we thought we knew what a 1-year-old would be like. So here we are expecting another 1-year-old to be very similar to our biological 1-year-old, not understanding that this 1-year-old had a different trauma, a different birth process than our bio 1-year-old. So it was gonna look totally different. So that transition was really, really hard. And I would say we did not start feeling normal again until probably about 3 years. It probably took about 3 years for us to start feeling like, okay, our feet are back under us and we have this thing under control. I remember, so the turning point for my daughter, and this is gonna sound ridiculous, but for my older daughter, was when we finalized his adoption, because forever she was like, we need to take him back, we need to take him back. So we told her when we finalized his adoption, we were like, we are going to finalize our adoption, and he's getting our last name, and he's gonna be your brother. And she could not process, like, well, he wasn't in your belly, and do we have the same blood? And so we had to tell her that we were going to the doctor, and he was going to get our blood, and we were gonna get his blood, and we were gonna all have the same blood, because that in her mind was the only way that she could process, like, okay, this is my brother. Again, she was like 4, almost 5. So for her, she couldn't understand or process. So we literally had to tell her that, which is insane. I know, don't judge us, okay? But it worked. So after that, when we went to court and all of that, and we had a day where we went out with just him and had breakfast and all of that good stuff. And so after that, she didn't say it anymore. It literally changed her mindset, and that became her brother. So that was her changing point. I think for myself, it was understanding that, okay, this baby didn't grow in my belly, so he was exposed to things that I'm not sure of, that I'm not aware of, things that even, you know, our adoption agency may have not been aware of. I don't know, you know, how honest his birth mother was. And so I'm sure, and even if there wasn't any other outside exposures, just the trauma of a stressful pregnancy can do things to an infant's brain. So I know that as a therapist, that, you know, when the baby is exposed to a stressful womb and a stressful pregnancy, that the type of hormones and things that are produced can affect that child. So it was that kind of awareness that began to transition my frame of thinking and my expectations. And as he got older and we did more testing and saw outside help, we realized that there was some developmental delays and things like that. And so what becomes hard with adoption, especially when you are adopting a baby, and even though he wasn't a baby, I think this still applies to adopting a baby, is that this baby or this little one can look perfectly healthy, can appear to be normal to everybody else, including yourself, and yet and still they have things going on that are not seen on the surface. You know, there are learning delays that people don't understand, or that you yourself may not understand. There are, you know, some mental things as far as mental health things that may arise that you don't see on the surface. So I think a lot of people don't really understand that. I didn't understand that, and they don't take that into consideration, which can really make that transition period more difficult if you have set yourself up to think, I'm getting this perfectly healthy infant or this perfectly healthy baby that, you know, hasn't had any trauma because they weren't exposed to any trauma. You know, I'm getting them right at, you know, birth or right when they're little. For us, for him, for our thinking, it was his mom, you know, willingly gave up parental rights and he went straight into foster care to these wonderful foster parents who were so wonderful and so loving. So we, you know, we're not going to be dealing with the traumas of a child that was older, which is what we thought, you know, trauma coming from an older child. So that was kind of our thinking, and that's not what it looked like. So I hope that all makes sense. I kind of rambled, but hopefully that kind of makes sense and explains that early transition period of going from 3 kids to 4, and then the 4th one being our adopted child. So yeah, I am seeing you guys' questions, and I will be working on answering those as I make more videos. I will answer them when they fit into that particular topic. So please keep watching. If you have other questions, please leave them below and I will answer them to the best of my ability. And hopefully I will get my husband to come on and talk about his experience as well. So yes, so that's it. Thank you guys for watching. Again, if you haven't subscribed, please do so. If you have subscribed and are already part of the non-traditional family, then thank you so much. And I will see you guys next time. Cheers.